After exhausting massive amounts of brainpower on his three-tiered cake Utopia, Plato wasn't content to be just a keyboard philosopher. He was an idealist with action. He thought, "My design is so perfect, I must find a country to test it in." However, reality is always harsh. Plato's attempts to implement his utopia in real states were, in modern slang, massive public humiliation events. Either his time hadn't arrived, or his utopia was simply too impractical. After all, the currency was made of iron. All his practical ventures ended in disastrous failure. Plato designed utopia as a rigid social structure, much like a three-layer birthday cake. Top tier, the rulers, government executives. Middle tier, the warriors, security and enforcers. Bottom tier, the common people, laborers, workers. Above these three tiers was a small team of legislators, the board of directors. Plato mandated that the initial rulers must be philosophers because they possessed sufficient wisdom to execute the director's development plan. The idea of the philosopher king was crudely simple. The state is a ship, and the captain must be the smartest person. You cannot let a bunch of sailors vote on the course. This position, however, was no iron rice bowl. If a philosopher ruler erred, they could be demoted. Conversely, if a common person excelled, they could be promoted all the way up. Plato naively believed that as long as these three classes performed their duties, utopia would achieve perfect harmony. Plato designed utopia as a rigid social structure, much like a three-layer birthday cake. Top tier, the rulers, government executives. Middle tier, the warriors, security and enforcers. Bottom tier, the common people, laborers, workers. Above these three tiers was a small team of legislators, the board of directors. Plato mandated that the initial rulers must be philosophers because they possessed sufficient wisdom to execute the director's development plan. The idea of the philosopher king was crudely simple. The state is a ship, and the captain must be the smartest person. You cannot let a bunch of sailors vote on the course. This position, however, was no iron rice bowl. If a philosopher ruler erred, they could be demoted. Conversely, if a common person excelled, they could be promoted all the way up. Plato naively believed that as long as these three classes performed their duties, utopia would achieve perfect harmony. Plato created an amusing ranking for state governance models. Aristocracy, ruled by the best people, i.e., his utopia. Timocracy, ruled by honorable, honest people. Oligarchy, ruled by a wealthy few. Democracy, ruled by the people. In Plato's mind, this was a defective product. Tyranny, ruled by one person calling all the shots. Unsurprisingly, his utopia chose the highest rank, aristocracy. What was the salary once one was selected as a ruler? 0 material benefits. They were forbidden from owning private property and had to live a military-style communal life, sharing all assets. Plato optimistically believed that despite their poverty, the rulers would be quite happy, because utopia's goal was the happiness of all citizens, not just high salaries for a few executives. This sounds like an emotionally fulfilling job, but one that rejects all executive perks. To ensure utopia's harmony, education was paramount. Plato believed the most important subjects were music and gymnastics. But don't misunderstand, this wasn't about karaoke or hitting the gym. It meant the entire curriculum that instills dignity, etiquette, and courage. In today's terms, it was the entire curriculum of political correctness. For this reason, all teaching materials had to undergo strict censorship. Works describing cowardice or evil would prematurely corrupt children's minds, and were banned. Homer's epics? Eliminated. They described gods behaving improperly and would set a bad example. Plato's response was, "We worship you as incredible artists, but I'm sorry, Utopia doesn't need you. Please go perform in another city-state." Polite, yet utterly ruthless. Even children's food had to be specially prepared. They could only eat grilled fish and roasted meat prepared according to a fixed recipe and without any seasoning. By today's standards, this was the highly sought-after ancient organic food because it was thought to prevent children from getting sick. In Utopia, private property, including gold and jewels, was strictly forbidden. Most shockingly, children were not private property of their parents. Mothers, aged 20 to 40, and fathers, 25 to 55, could only reproduce with state approval. Otherwise, it was illegal. Immediately after birth, children were separated from their parents and sent for unified state education and physical training. Parents didn't know which child was theirs, and children didn't know who their parents were. All adults of the appropriate age were the children's parents, and all children of similar age were siblings. This naturally raises a critical issue: how to prevent large-scale inbreeding. Plato provided no clear answer. However, recalling that Sparta discarded disabled infants, Plato's Utopia also mandated that disabled children be taken to a place no one knows immediately after birth. This suggests that genetic defects resulting from inbreeding might have been a troublesome reality in that era. Plato classified state governance into 5 ranks, but from today's perspective, the second rank, democracy, is too vague to evaluate. The third, oligarchy, and fifth, tyranny, ultimately devolve into rule by the few or rule by one, essentially historical reversals. The two truly worth studying are his favorite, aristocracy, rule by the best, and his least favorite, democracy, rule by the people. Plato defined democracy as the people being able to do whatever they wanted and repeal laws at will. To him, this was the very definition of social disorder and anarchy. If everyone wants different things, won't it just result in chaos? And aristocracy? History has proven countless times that the best leaders start as diligent saviors, but given time, they easily succumb to the delusion of only I can save the world, gradually transitioning toward autocracy. The awkwardness, whether occurring during their lives or posthumously, leaves later generations infinitely lamenting. Therefore, modern thinkers propose a golden mean, combining Plato's aristocracy, the best talent, with democracy, popular choice and supervision. The state should be governed by the most excellent people, but these individuals must be selected through universal suffrage and subjected to popular supervision. Yet, a new problem emerges. Taking the modern democratic model of the United States, candidates must raise enormous campaign funds to travel and campaign. This financial barrier is insurmountable for ordinary people. So the questions persist. Are the people selected truly the most excellent? What about the more excellent people who cannot afford to run? What about the excellent candidates who are not recognized by the people, and thus lose the election? After coming full circle, we are back where we started. Which method is truly the most reasonable? Perhaps Plato's Utopia itself is the ultimate irony of this question. There may truly be no perfect political system in the world that can offer a definitive, unsolvable answer.